welcome to the show. Well, the Numsa strike still underway around the country. Tomorrow, Cosatu is starting a march on World Day for Decent Work. Cosatu says they're protesting against the way our economy is getting worse, and of course we're losing jobs. The chief economist at economist.co.za, Mike Schussler, has been looking at this. He has a long economic memory as well. Mike, good afternoon to you, and thank you for your time. When we say our economy is failing, which markers do we look at? How do we assess the claim that our economy is producing less than it did, say, 10 years ago or 5 years ago?
Well, we could look at GDP, which is looking up a bit, but that's mainly due to commodity prices. Then we can look at different sectors. We can see that our manufacturing sector, for example, is still 15% below its 2008 highs. We can look at the employment in the manufacturing sector, and we can see that has really wiped out all the gains that we had since 1969. That's 52 years ago. Stephen, you know, if you look at the unemployment rate overall, it looks like fewer and fewer people are benefiting from the economy. If we look at it as people that actually work in the formal sector, it's roughly about 1 in 4 adults, and that is just not good enough. And if we look at it a bit further, and we expand that and we say, how many South Africans actually work in one form or another, informal market, domestic, formal, we can see that less than 35% of all people above the age of 15 are employed. That's one of the lowest 3 or 4 countries in the world that the World Bank measures, and they measure about 185 countries. So certainly that is a marker that shows that we failed, because we used to be closer to 42%, and that is a very, very big drop in the last 2 decades. So quite clearly we are not creating jobs. Fewer people are employed. That means our inequality increases, because the main driver of inequality is unemployment. And it also means that our poverty, we're one of only 4, 5, 6 countries in the world. The data is a bit old, but it was in 2016, 17, where poverty was increasing, absolute poverty was increasing. So these are obviously big markers, and we need to take that into consideration. And I think that is the picture that I see in front of me, Stephen.
I mean, there's several other aspects around this context. So the one is that this is actually also a regional problem. If you look at Zimbabwe, Namibia, Eswatini, you'll see Botswana, you'll see very high rates of unemployment there too. I mean, all of these countries in our region are sort of in the top 10 for youth unemployment in particular. Also, unemployment in South Africa, with one blip, has really been going up, I suppose, since the 1970s. The question, of course, is how did we get here when other regions of the world are not in as difficult a position as we are?
Well, I think the rest of the world is much more friendly towards firms and entrepreneurs, first of all. And the second thing is, I think we have a bit of a commodity disease, in that we think the world needs us more than we need the world. And every time you know, we do that, we don't think of attracting investment very seriously. And the other fact is, we've still got a very high unionism, and it's not that unions are not needed. They are part of democracy, and they really are needed. But I think the fact is that our unions are very, very hostile towards business, believe really in the sort of 1950s style unionism that was very destructive in quite a lot of countries that went after that. Unionism became much closer to business, and we saw much more job creation, but not here, and not in Southern Africa. And the other thing is, all the governments in Southern Africa, with 1 or 2 exceptions, are still very, very anti-business, and they come from the liberation background and haven't sorted out how the world works yet. We seem to be stuck in an era of 70, 80 years ago, and it's starting to tell. Southern Africa is seeing far more countries into the bottom 20 of per capita income, and even South Africa is falling behind. And the only one that's doing quite reasonably well, not exceptionally well in terms of the rest of the world, is Botswana. It's had a good growth rate, but it's also got a large amount of people growth rate too. But ultimately, I think we're looking at Southern Africa falling behind in the main, and that is very, very worrisome. Today we see, for example, more people in Ethiopia work in manufacturing than we do in South Africa, and that wasn't the case, even 15 years ago.
Cosatu is really protesting for better jobs, for more jobs for its members. You say one of the problems in our economy is that people get paid more here to do the same job that other people do in other countries. And I mean, there's sort of classic examples of this, the textile industry, what happened in China. What do you believe is happening in our economy from that point of view? Are we just uncompetitive in your view?
Well, let's not blame labor the whole time, but labor is part of the problem. But, we have electricity problems, we have water problems, with both supply and price starting to increase. Our transport system is starting to fail us, especially in the heavy industries. We're starting to notice all sort of things that go back. We've seen, for example, Clover move from one little town to Durban because of the transport problems. We know of factories having to supply their own electricity, own security, because the police don't come. Whether it's a cheese factory or whether it's a milk factory, people need a lot more certainty. And our state is failing to deliver us, both the state-owned enterprises and the actual state. Yet we have more rules and regulations. And what's not politically correct to say, but is needed to be said, is that black economic empowerment equals black economic impoverishment, because it's an elite that's picking it up. And more people internationally are seeing this, and they're starting to shake their heads about what we're doing. So we're saying a certain very select few people get the deals, and because they get the deals, the price of coal, for example, goes up to Eskom, and the rest of the South Africans, pay for it. And the majority of South Africans are black, and they pay for it in their electricity price. Even if they don't have electricity, it means the price of other goods that they buy that's made using electricity, whether it's a packet of crisps or a loaf of bread, goes up in price. And that is also part of the problem. We don't have honest discussions in this country because everybody's trying to be politically correct and not talk the truth. And I think that's very much part of the problem. Then on top of that, we have a competition commission that's trying to act more stringent than the European or the American ones in a developing country. It's because we have a hostile government. That's what business at least believes, and it has believed that for quite a number of years now. And they don't feel that they get any help. We saw with COVID, very little. It was private sector help to the private sector and from very rich people rather than from government. And also the bank rates were dropped and so on from the Reserve Bank. But everywhere else, businesses were helped out by government. We are not seeing the recovery in formal sector employment by the second quarter of this year. Most countries have bounced back, but South Africa has not. In fact, our level of employment in the formal sector is very close to what it was in the second quarter during the hard lockdown in 2020. And we need to understand that business needs more certainty, but they also need to feel that government is on their side and not there to milk them just for taxes.
Mike Schussler, thank you very much indeed. Economist at economist.co.za. Strong view from him.